see you again, and we're going to go over some things that you might remember from last time. If you do, that's really good, because that means you'll remember what I told you last time, and that's a dear friend of mine. His name's John Thurman here in Orlando. Tells me all the time, John, product plus application equals value, right? You can have the best product in the world. You can come here for financial advice, but if you leave here and you don't apply that financial advice, it's got zero value, right? You can go to Home Depot, buy a light bulb. Great product. If you come in and you don't screw it in, then it has no value. So everything we shared last time, and we'll share some of those things again and some new things just to think about. And I want to leave a little bit of time at the end, because what's most important to me is what's happening in your life currently. Everybody's at a different age. Everybody's at a different stage in life. Everybody's at a different place with regards to maybe a second home somewhere in a different environment, or travel that you might have. So those are the type of things I want to get you thinking about as we go through the morning. About me real quick, I think since we were last together, we've had a blessed career. I had a lot of fun. I call it the high fun, low margin business, but that's okay. I enjoy it. We just did 17 days on the road with Conor McGregor. If you know that name, he's the controversial fighter that's out there. You either love him or you hate him. Most people hate him. And so you can imagine being in his space for 17 days with his family and 4 kids, and protecting that individual. It takes a lot of awareness. And so everything that we're going to talk about today is stuff that we apply on a daily basis when we're out on the road. We're going to Las Vegas 2 weeks from now. I'll have Bruno Mars, which many of you know. And so I say those things just to say I'm telling you things that are very practical. They're kind of amplified in my world because we do them on a regular basis, but they apply to you and they apply to me at home with my family. That's my whatness and what I do. My who-ness that I like to say is I'm a father. I have 2 daughters, 21 and 27 now. I sent them off to college at one point at 17 years old. I sent my oldest daughter now, I sent her at 17 years old to Kiev in the Ukraine before the war. And but it was still a pretty iffy location to be heading off to. And a lot of my friends would say, "Oh, that's crazy, your daughter's going to Ukraine. I wasn't going with her. You're sending her off to stay at a camp somewhere to help teach English to kids there." And people thought that was risky. And in fact, there is some risk, right? Again, it's like with your financial advice. They can give you good wisdom based on experience, but they can't predict the market completely, right? There's no way to take the risk out of everything 100%. But if we're smart, we can mitigate the risk, we can analyze the risk, and then we can apply some things that give us the best chance for success. And that's what I had done with my daughter. The things I'm going to talk about and teach you today, I spent from the time she was 4 years old, right? When I got around her, my oldest is technically my stepdaughter. But I really don't speak that much. But from the time she was 4 to the time she left on that trip at 17, I had been teaching her situational awareness, all the things we're going to talk about. And I knew and had a comfort level that she's probably one of the most aware individuals that you'll ever meet. She walks into a room and unconsciously she is very competent in knowing what her options are. She doesn't even have to think about it. Let's talk about that real quick. There are 4 levels of change if you're going to change anything. And let me pass these out. I clearly, you'll notice, have a millennial, God love him, who is typing these because the print is so small I can't even let me do one, and then just a reference, and I'm going to put on my glasses to do that. I'll talk to you about this later. But there's 4 levels of change that you have to go through. We can't possibly, in 30 minutes or less, get you proficient in any particular skill today, right? But what we can do is we can take you to the second level of change. That first level is what I call unconscious incompetence, right? And incompetence is a strong word, but unconscious awareness, let's say. If you don't realize you're not aware in any given situation, and that could be with anything in your life, the way you do your email, or the way you deal with your kids, or the way you do your finances, you're unconsciously incompetent until one day you've had issues or something comes up, you see an email like this that we talked about, and you say, oh my gosh, wow, I am at risk. So now you've shifted into a level of conscious incompetence, right? You realize, wow, this is a vulnerability in my life, and I should probably be aware of that. Well, that's what we're going to try to do today. We're going to try to at least get you in some of these situations to think about, where am I unconsciously incompetent? Where can I shift into going, now I realize I have a vulnerability. And then the third step is what you're going to have to do after you leave here, and that is you're going to have to spend some time being consciously competent, right? You're going to have to go, okay, I may apply. I'm going to give you one or two things. I'm going to keep it super simple. One or two things that you could do physically from the time you walk out this door to say, if I just do that, if I just do that, if I just do that, I'll be a little more consciously competent. Until one day, and I promise you, I can guarantee the success of this 100%. If you apply that for the next 30 or 45 days, one day you're going to wake up and you're going to realize, oh my gosh, I'm not even having to think about that anymore. I'm suddenly unconsciously competent, right? People ask me sometimes, how do you walk around thinking, it's not like that, right? I mean, I don't have to think about it. It's just, I've been doing it for so long. It happens naturally. When I walk into a space, when I get out of my car, whatever that might be. So we're trying to shift you through that phase. That's a great litmus test for you to use personally in any stage of anything you're trying to change in your life. Where am I at today? Am I unconsciously incompetent? I don't even realize I need to change this, but it keeps becoming a problem in my life. Then let's try to shift. But you can't skip steps. So we're going to jump through these pretty quickly. In our business, I would tell my daughter, right, if somebody said, Jeff, you've got 30 minutes to talk to your daughter and then send her off into this dangerous world. This is kind of boiled down. I can do this over 2.5 hours, but this is the boiled down version. I would give her one book to read to take with her. I offered it up last time. Some of you may have read it. If you haven't, I suggest it again. Again, application. The book is The Gift of Fear by a guy named Gavin DeBecker. And that is a great book in that Gavin was a law enforcement professional. He studied people who survived miraculously some very dangerous situations they had walked themselves into. And in every one of those post-interviews, Gavin started to see a pattern. And that pattern was, during the course of the interview, they would say, I had this feeling. And he's like, wait a minute, I heard that before. And then I heard it before. And then I heard it before. And I think we've all said it in conversation, right? You're telling a friend about a situation that happened. Wow, I had this feeling. Who's had that feeling that I'm talking about in a situation, right? Gavin would call that the gift of fear. Some of us say, oh, fear is something you avoid. Well, I'd say, is pain something we avoid? Yeah, we avoid pain, but it has a purpose, right? And if you're hitting your thumb with a hammer, pain is telling you, don't do that. Right? This is not good, and it's not going to end well. Gavin would say, and he's not a Christian guy, so this doesn't have to be about spirituality if that's not for you. For me, I happen to be a believer. I believe that Holy Spirit is saying, it's the gift that says, hey, something's amiss here, something's wrong, right? And Gavin would say, tune into that, listen to that voice as it happens to you. And the way he describes it, I won't give away the book, but the one thing he does say, he says, how he proves that is if you're on the edge of a cliff, your fear is of what? Yeah, falling off, right? I'm on the edge and I go, ooh, I fear falling off. If you fall off the cliff, where's your fear now? Hitting the ground, right? Your fear is always out in front of you. It's not evidence of what's actually happening in the moment. Now, it could come on you fast. You know, that situation can accelerate very quickly. But it is proof that that is out in front of you. So when you feel that feeling, that's telling you, it's giving you kind of a pre-action indicator of what could be happening. Now, we could be wrong, right? We could get those feelings wrong. But what's the downside if we respond to wrong? If we just don't get out of our car, that felt weird, or avoid a particular situation. We don't know if that could have been bad, but we know it didn't go bad, and that's good for us, right? So we want to avoid those situations and listen to that fear. The best quote I can give you, and you mentioned it earlier, is your body can't go where your mind's never been. She didn't say it exactly that way, but she did say that if I show you these examples, later if you run into them, right, you're going to be aware. So what she just did was train your mind for the what if that could happen. And you need to be thinking about that way. In our business, we say that a lot. Your body can't go where your mind has never been. If you've been on an airline, they've proven that plenty of times, right? You get on the airline and you sit there, and what do you hear? You hear the same speech, no matter if you're on Delta or Spirit or Southwest or whoever that might be, right? You hear the same speech, and what they've proven is they're training your mind. And you might tune that out, and you may think, I've heard it before, I know, but it's because you do know. Because what they've also proven, if there's 232 people on a 727, if there's an emergency, everybody can't go out the front door the way you came in. They won't get that plane clear in the minute and a half that they have to clear. They're going to pop all the doors, you're going to know. Exits, so you've subconsciously registered where the exits are, right? We've all seen the thing. Right? We all know. Right? We don't know it exactly, but we pretty much know if the thing drops down, what do I do first? On me, right? So they are training your mind to get past step one and immediately go to step two. And that happens in anything. Somebody starts, the worst case scenario, somebody had a home invasion, somebody starts kicking in your door. If you haven't thought that through, just a moment, what if that were to happen? What if somebody rings the doorbell and we're not expecting a package? I haven't thought through what I would do. Then you're probably just going to go open the door. And now you've walked yourself right into a situation. So you want to think about that. Discuss it with your family members. What do we do in these particular cases? You don't have to do it very often. She did that once, and it's set. You'll know if you see those emails, right? So this is once today, where we'll start to be aware of some more things. So that's the quote. Choose what type of person you're going to be. In our business, we talk about 3 types of people, right? There are wolves. Anybody who watches the news today, I don't care what you watch, there are bad people with bad intentions. Socioeconomic problems and coming out of COVID bring out, unfortunately, the worst in people. Now, I've been to third world countries. I understand. I'm also a father. I've got 2 kids. I get to a point where I can't feed those kids. Now maybe my moral compass starts to change. Or maybe I never had a moral compass to begin with. And I start to justify in my mind, you have something that my kids need, and I think I should be able to take it, right? And that is happening all over the world. And unfortunately, we're seeing it in our own neighborhoods today, because now it's easy to travel, and we travel where the money is, right? To go get what we want. And so, not making a moral statement here, just saying we need to be aware. And if we've got our head in the sand and think that can't be a problem for us, then we're asking ourselves to be victims, right? So, want to be aware there. We talked about, so the wolves basically, and then there are sheep, which we are what? What do sheep do? They just wander around. Shepherd tells them where to go, where to eat, where to go next, right? And that's kind of how we want to live our lives, right? We just want to be left alone. We're just like, let us be sheep and do our thing. The challenge with that is that if you study any of these situations, from the Pulse nightclub shooting that happened here in Orlando, the Belgium bombing that happened there, to any of the most recent things, to the fires that just happened in Maui. And that's a great thing that we could dissect and talk about, that said, I guarantee nobody in those 14,000 or so people that have been displaced right now, 114 were pronounced dead, and there's 1,000 people missing still. Of all those people, the day before, I can guarantee you none of them thought that was going to be happening the next day, or they would have been where? Anywhere else. Anywhere else, right? Nobody was going to stick around for that show if they would have thought. So they were just like us in this room today, the day before that happened, which tells me that we could be just like them tomorrow if we're not careful, right? So we want to be thinking, this isn't all doom and gloom, but it's about preparation, right? It's about thinking. I use the example of a stuntman sometimes. We all look at stuntmen who dive off high buildings into, bags, and they go, oh, that's an exciting life, but you are crazy. Right? You are crazy. I introduced Jeff Gordon one time. You might know the name from NASCAR racing. Jeff Gordon, drives 200-something miles an hour. I introduced him to, who was it? This guy who was a stuntman one time, and I heard Jeff say to him, you're crazy. Really? I mean, I think Jeff's kind of crazy, right? It's all relative, but nobody Jeff or the stuntman want to die. So what they've done is they've said, I'm going to mitigate the risk, I'm going to study the risk, I'm going to put myself in a roll cage, I'm going to have a helmet and a fire suit and a seat belt, and then I'm going to go do some things that I love, right? So that's our approach to security. When my clients say they want to go to third world countries and do a concert, they want to go here, they go there, it would be so much easier for us to say, oh no, we can't go there. Yeah. We can protect you here at home, right? Tell my daughter at 17, no, you can't go there. You're safer here with us. She's not going to experience this amazing planet and the amazing things that it has to offer. I don't want that. I want young ladies like this to be able to go explore the world and see what it's all about. And young ladies like talk to me first.
Are you going to escort her?
Yes. And so, I have a client whose sons were 10 and 12 when I met them. I can tell you their names, Max and McGuire, because you don't know his name. But, and he had us come to their house and do some training for Max and McGuire. Last year I took Max, who is now 21, on a spring break trip to Tulum, Mexico. And I was amazed that Max is one of the most tuned-in young adults that I've ever met. And he remembered that training. Max is texting me, and I'm standing up at the bar area just watching their fun party, have a good time. Max is texting me, hey sir, there's a couple of guys dealing drugs by the bathroom. Okay, I didn't pick up on that. Max was aware, right? He had listened to the training, he had applied it during the course of his life, and now he's living large. Now, Max did just get his $50,000 watch stolen in New York City recently because he forgot. You know, let's not be flashy, right? Let's be careful when we travel. Let's make sure we're not announcing all these things to the world. And so we've had a conversation since then. And he was like, oh. It turned out okay. He's smart enough to say, give it away. The $50,000 is not worth your life. And if you're affluent and you have the means to buy the $50,000 watch in the first place, then you probably have the means to do without it or replace it. But you can't replace your life. So it's give and go at that point. We can talk about that a little bit more. So different types of people we talked about: sheep, wolves, and sheepdogs. What do I mean by that? Sheepdogs are the people we all expect to come save us, right? The ambulance driver, the doctor when we get to the hospital, the police officers who come rushing in, the fire department who's going to come put out the fire in our kitchen, whatever that might be. What's the problem with being totally reliant on sheepdogs?
Protection.
The time gap.
They are,
right? The time gap. And the busier they get, the bigger the time gap gets. I saw in Austin, Texas, the police just announced to people, if you get robbed on the street, please don't call 911, we're too busy. Call 311, it's the non-emergency number to report that you had gotten robbed.
Yeah.
That, the time gap just got busier. When the Pulse nightclub shooting happened, right? There was one individual that was stationed there, an armed security officer, right? The damage typically happens in these situations in less than 2 minutes. The response time for the sheepdogs is usually a little more than 2 minutes. So, if we aren't all part sheepdog, right, that means we're on our own. We're just sheep for slaughter. Excuse my language. But that is the reality, right? And we used to spend our time teaching clients about threats that happen. Maybe I would try to convince a CEO, oh, there could be a threat against you, sir, you're a high net worth individual. The reality of that was probably pretty thin. But the reality is that the threat is to the environment that you might be in. And I don't care if that's a stadium or a movie theater or the Walmart, wherever that might be, you getting caught up in the situation that's happening in an environment you might have to be in, that's a reality for all of us today that we need to be thinking about. So you want to be a little bit sheepdog, right? Does that make sense? Any questions about that? Comments? Otherwise? Okay. Let's talk about the two places. I'm just going to break it down to two that you're most vulnerable. I want you to be thinking about, be aware. Where do we think those are? Where are you most vulnerable in your day? When you woke up today and got to here, between there and here, where are you most vulnerable? Somebody speak up because I'm getting a lot of
Moving. One
moving.
place to another.
There you go. Transitions, right? Anytime you're transitioning from one space to another, you're typically most vulnerable. You're distracted a lot of times, right? Now you're coming out, you got your groceries, you got your cart, you're going, did I get everything? Look at the receipt, whatever that might be. And now you've stepped out into an open space. You know, Jenny and I went to Sam's last night. It was the same type of thing, right? You come out, we're chatting with each other, we're not really thinking about what's going on. Those are the opportunities that bad guys are looking for. So anytime you're transitioning from a car to a theater, from a car to a restaurant, from your house into your car, out of your garage, those type times are the times you want to raise your mental awareness level, right? To go, okay, I just need to be a little more tuned in. In our neighborhood, we have bears. One just made the national news. If you Google it, Tripod, the three-legged bear, lives in our neighborhood, right? And he's been on all the news channels the last few days. And Jenny called me once about a month ago and said, hey, when you come home, don't walk in the garage. Tripod's in the garage, right? He was foraging for garbage, trying to get into my garbage can. And so it's something as simple as that. It may not be a personal threat, but it may be something you could walk into, and you certainly don't want to be surprised going to take your dog out for a walk and step onto the front porch with Tripod the bear, who's very capable with 3 legs, and not make your day very good, right? So it's about awareness and pushing awareness out in front of you before you head out or into the world. So transitions are one. And then I would say your second most vulnerable place is once you're stationary in an unknown environment, right? Now you're seated in the theater. Now you're seated in church. Now you're seated in a restaurant, right? And we can talk about some practical tips as to what to do there. I'll give you an opportunity to ask me some questions about that in just a minute. So top areas of awareness, I just listed some here for you to be thinking about. And again, you can take this with you. Pumping gas, ATMs. I would suggest not doing ATMs anymore. I'm guessing most of you don't. But if you do, avoid that as much as possible. That is just, I'm a bad guy. What do I know is going to happen at an ATM, right? Nobody typically goes there to deposit a lot of money. They're typically taking out cash. And if I need petty cash, all I got to do is take it from you. And that's certainly easy. So ATMs, gas stations, drive-through windows. Where are you vulnerable at a drive-through? You go into the Wendy's late at night, you pull in between a car, what happens? You're immediately stuck. The car in front of you is too tight to go anywhere. The car behind you is right behind you. You are a stationary target, and you typically have what? Your window down, right? And you're typically ready to pay with something. You've got your wallet out. So if I'm a bad guy, that's a pretty good opportunity for me. And there's bushes around or whatever. I just sit there and wait for the most exclusive car to pull up with a person who looks like they have the most to take. And I take it and I'm gone in the dark before you know. So just another place to be aware, right? Does that make sense? At home, we can certainly talk about just home things, but I will tell you, and I'll show you some practical tools. Home things become, I do the odds on this, and I want to be very practical. I don't ask you to put in place anything that is over the top and unrealistic, and I've taught everything from martial arts to situational awareness to protective details. I want it to be practical. And I always say that, well, that's BS, right? That's not going to work when it actually happens. So at home, what are the most practical things you might deal with, right? In my neighborhood, it could be an animal, right? That's more practical than in a gated neighborhood getting my door kicked in by a home invader. We've never had anything happen in that neighborhood in the last 20 years. So statistically, the chance of it happening, right, is pretty low. However, house fires have happened, right? Electrical storms in Florida that cause lightning and cause a fire may happen. So there's more of a statistic to have a fire. So what have I done? And I've got this listed on the bottom, but this hero spray is just one example of the thing that I keep around the house, right? I have probably 4 of these tucked away. They're a real quick little aerosol can that can put out a kitchen fire or an oil fire or whatever that might be. I have one up in our daughter's bedroom upstairs, right? I have one down. We don't want it right next to the stove, right? Where's the fire going to happen, right? Oh, the fire extinguisher's right there in the middle of the flames, right? So you got to be practical about where you put it. But just implementing some of these things and putting them there, hoping you'll never have to use them, reduces the risk, right? I was just up at my mother's house. She's 86. And twice while we were up visiting her, I was like, did somebody leave something on the stove? My mom is not quite as sharp as she used to be, but she loves to cook. She's a good Southern woman. She's always going to cook my favorite meals when we come. Twice in the 5 days that we're there, she left a pot on the stove with a burnt on it.
That's scary.
It is. And I had to have a conversation with my father, right? They're both of good health. And I sent him about 4 of these. Right? I said, Pops, put this in place, right? Because their risk is going up, right? So you want to be smart about that. If you have elderly, family members and that's starting to happen, these are practical tools for them as well. So at home, at your workplace, right? You can walk around this particular workplace and say, let's be reasonable, let's be practical. What are your particular vulnerabilities? And we can do a couple of things that said we can reduce that risk. You can't do all things. And we're not going to go get into a martial arts class at our age, right? And say, well, let's go learn this new skill set. So if I can give you a few things to practically put in place, which is situational awareness and some practical tools, you're going to be way ahead of the game. So fitness, if you have a particular fitness routine or a dog walk or anything that you do on a regular routine basis, I go get groceries every morning at this time. And sometimes it's not about threat to you personally. It's if I know where you're at and what you do on a regular basis, I also know where you're not at. Right? If I wanted to break into a nice, affluent home here in Orlando, I would go watch these homes, or I would go sit at the international terminal at the airport, and I would just look for people's backpacks, right? That had their address on it because they had it open and exposed. And I would go, oh, the Willis family, and their address is, oh, that's Bay Hill. All right, Bay Hill address. The Willis family is going to Europe for the next 7 days, right? They got their international tickets and their hats on, and they're all packed up and ready to go. And they think it's probably going to be a great vacation. The day they get back is not going to be very fun because I will probably have cleared out their house because I know that's not where they're at.
Or you see it on Facebook, they're going out of town.
Exactly. That's a great point. And we can talk about your social media footprint, right? If you look, and I have a little bit of social media, but I have to be very careful about it because of our clients and so forth. But I do it because clients will ask about that. We never, I post things from a year ago, right? Because if something that's been done, has been done, it was fun then, I can post it then, but there's no chance of showing somebody knowing where I'm not or where I'm gonna be, especially with our clients, right? So post in arrears. Everything that you post should be somewhere you were, right? And a long time. It's not, hey, we're in Rome, this happened yesterday. You're still in Rome. Right? I'm not stupid, right? I know where you're not. So be smart about that in your social footprint as well. Large gathering venues, that's becoming more of a thing, right? Is you go to a festival, there are a lot of summer festivals, or you go to your favorite concert or music venue or whatever that might be. If you happen to be in France the night that the Bataclan issue happened there several years back, even if you weren't involved in what actually happened, I can give you a picture of what happened in every other mass event in that city that night. Panic, right? The news starts to travel by phone, and people start to go, oh, this just happened, and people start to pour out of all these venues. If you had a hired car service in France that night, I can guarantee you that a majority of those cars left and went home to their own families because they were in their own panic. Those drivers have kids and families, and you are not their biggest priority, right? So you've been pushed out a secondary exit at a venue that you didn't know to begin with, looking for a car that's no longer there, in a city you don't speak the language, on a street that you don't know, right? You've just made yourself a target for secondary issues. So those are things that you want to be thinking about as you go. And I'm going to give you, again, some practical tools to apply that might be able to mitigate some of those particular chances. Traveling domestic, international, I'll give you all kinds of tips on that. We can talk after this or online. Uber and Lyft. I'll give you a story that happened to me personally just a few weeks back. I was in San Francisco. We were doing a major event. It was late at night. I dressed up because I've got to go meet with a client. And so I'm dressed to the nines. I've got my suit on. I'm trying to look sharp, and I grab my Uber, but I'm a little distracted. And I didn't realize I put in the wrong address of my destination, right? Innocent. Uber pulls up. I get in the car. Now, when we put our address in, what do we assume, right? We're going to end up where we put it. So I go into work mode, right? My awareness level went down because now I'm in this little cocoon of maneuver space, and I knew where he was taking me to, so I lost it. And I go into work mode, and I'm not aware. We get to the location, he stops, I'm kind of surprised, it feels like it's a little sooner than it should be, but I don't think, okay, maybe we didn't need traffic. I get out, I close the door, I make sure I got my phone, my bag, everything else, close the door. Now I can't travel armed in California, right? I go on there commercially, so I can't travel armed like I normally be. So I didn't have my tools that I would normally have. And as I close the door and he drives off, I looked up, and I can tell you, I must have been in the most dangerous neighborhood in downtown part of San Francisco. There was a homeless encampment across the street. There were crack, everything. I looked like you just threw a piece of meat into a dog farm, right? And I felt it. You talk about have that feeling, right? And I have plenty of fear just like anybody else, and I know when I'm out of my zone, and that just rocked me. I'm literally standing there, and I clearly don't fit the part in this neighborhood, and there's no way to not fit the part. I mean, you're here. And so I'm head down, all these people are looking at me from across the street, and I'm like, move. And so I start moving, I turn the corner immediately, I try to get away from that space, and as soon as I could, I stepped into a doorway where nobody's looking, and I'm on my phone trying to get another Uber back to me, because I don't know where I'm at, other than it's saying my location. So I say that, had that been Jenny, God forbid, had that been any of you, had that been anybody else, and I think about it in my business, God forbid, I end up in a dumpster somewhere, and they find me the next day, they go like, the story reads, he was a really great guy. He must have been trying to buy crack or find a prostitute. I'm like, no, that wasn't me, right? It was a mistake, seriously. But that mistake could have cost me my life.
Yeah.
And it was simple.
Maybe he's the expert.
Right?
Maybe you're the expert.
Yeah, you should have known.
Yeah.
Right? So we all have vulnerabilities. I say that because we all, just like my client who just got his watch stolen, right? We're all going to have those moments. Don't beat yourself up. But beware, and learn from them when they happen. I came home immediately, told Jenny, she applied that into her tools, right, and we go from there.
So what would you have done differently then?
Well,
How did you just go and put in the wrong address? Or maybe you should have been more aware when you stepped out of the car?
both, yeah, I had totally forgotten all the principles that I'm teaching you today in that moment. I got sucked into comfort and a pattern, right? And so I put in the address, I didn't verify the address, right? I wouldn't have gotten myself into that situation to begin with. I usually stay and I connect with the driver because the driver can be a threat too, right? Especially if you're in a third world country, right? I've been to Mexico before, I've got clients going to Guadalajara here this month, and we talk about that, oh, do you have a black car service? We don't do anything down there without security, right? And so I want to know who the driver is, I want to know exactly where we're going. So I would have been much more tuned in, but I, just like anybody else, got sucked into that vulnerability very quickly. How are we doing on time? You need to... Don't worry, I'm sorry. I love this stuff, I can talk for hours, right? So, because I believe it. So, again, I talked about practicality. Prioritize your skill set, right? So people go like, oh, what should I do? Should I carry a gun? Should I carry a knife? Should I learn how to do this? Should I do that? Be realistic. Again, you don't have all the time to make everything a priority. So again, if you follow what I've got on here and do two things, right? I'm going to give you some tools to apply, some practical tools. If you went and bought these items today, and you're not buying from me, I don't have anything to sell, right? But I'm just telling you, if you went and bought these items today and put them in your home, you just raised your potential survivability and awareness in a fire, in a situation, whatever that is, exponentially. Do that, right? If somebody told us today, I could give you 2 tips to keep from getting cancer, right? If you just do those 2 things, you lower your rate chances by 70%, do that, right? We'd all do that. So that's all I'm asking. Apply these 2 things, situational awareness and some practical tools. And if you didn't do anything else, you'll be way ahead of the game. Top tools we recommend, right? And I'm just going to get down to these practically and more. So, hero spray, I talked about that earlier. This is the fire spray, right? And again, if I had to teach my daughter, when she was your age, if I had to teach her, honey, I'm going to teach you how to shoot a gun. I've done all that. But what would I teach in order? Teach her how to use this first, right? She's got more of a chance of a fire happening in the house than she does a home invader, right? So, if it is a home invader, maybe she can spray him in the eye. Works for both, right? sounds a little crazy, but we've all watched the news. It's called bear spray, right? And I don't say that just because I have bears in the neighborhood. These are actually in my cars. I have one of these in the door of every one of our vehicles, right? Because we have a black car service, we have way too many vehicles, but there is one in every one of the vehicles. And how does this apply? We've all seen situations today where you're on a city street and there's some protest going on, everybody surrounds your car, whatever that might be, right? And you don't want to run over, right? Like, I mean, the reality is we're gonna do what we have to do to survive, right? And don't forget that your vehicle is your option, right? But we want to try to do something to mitigate that advantage. You see road rage incidents that are happening on a regular basis today. Do not get yourself involved in them, but if you get sucked into that because somebody else, and I can tell you a story about that if we have time, where we got sucked into a road rage situation, and this is the answer, right? You're gonna put down your window, this will reach out from me to you, right? It'll definitely reach out to the hood of my car, and anybody who's in front of it, around it, or trying to aggress it are gonna get a face full of bear spray, and it's not fun, right? It will slow down that process and give you an opportunity to get out. Now, Jenny was walking in the neighborhood the other day, she had her dog, and a bear literally was between her and the house. And that bear decided he was interested in the dog, and so he started following them. And she's calling me on the phone. I'm in California. Why are you calling me? What am I going to do? Other than, be fearful with you. But had she carried this when she was, in our neighborhood, it might be more practical. In a neighborhood where that's not the pattern, I'm not going to carry a bat belt with all the potential options, right? In our neighborhood, it makes sense. Do what makes sense in your neighborhood.
Are there any legal ramifications to spraying something?
Not in Florida. Obviously, somebody could come back to you and say, oh, you assaulted me or whatever. Just make sure, like with any tool, right, that you feared for your life. It was clear aggression on their part, because chances are somebody's going to be videotaping it if it starts to escalate. Right? And you want to be able to prove that that's the case. But at least this is a non-lethal option, right?
How is that compared to the mace?
It's kind of a bigger version.
Goes far, long enough.
Yeah, exactly. It shoots longer, it sprays wider, and you don't have to be quite so accurate. The only problem is, again, if I carry mace, or my daughter carried mace in her purse, but it's not accessible to her, it really is, it may give her some feeling of comfort, but it's really not practical. It's not going to come in use, right?
Does it come in different sizes?
There are smaller sizes, I believe. This is one that I recommend, and they have the Armories, which is right up here in Winter Garden. They sell it there if you're looking, and I can tell you where to get all this stuff. I'm gonna get 2 more minutes, and we're gonna wrap this up, right? So this is called an IFAC, an individual first aid kit, right? Now, I do say have one of these, right? This isn't like a boo-boo kit, like have Band-Aids and small medical stuff. Have one of those also, because those are most practically what's going to happen is you're going to get, need a Band-Aid. These are more for major medical things. They have gauze in them, they have blood stop in them, they have, and I would suggest taking a class to learn this, but if you don't, having this on board in your car, right, or in your home, when a responder pulls up on the scene and says, I'm a nurse, do that, right? You've just given them the tools to be able to save you or your loved one that they didn't come prepared with, right? So it helps, even if you're not prepared to apply it yourself, just having it in your vehicle and available to somebody
What
may
did you
help
call
you.
it, Jim?
I'm sorry?
What did you call it?
It's called an IFAK, I-F-A-K. I'll give you, and I can send you an email. Yeah, it's on there. I can send you an email with all the links to where you can find it also. And then if I was going to carry one thing in my car, I would carry this. It's called a T tourniquet, right? Your car, if you think about your car engine, it's just like your body, right? Your car engine, suddenly it runs out of oil. What's going to happen? It's going to overheat and blow up. Can't run very long without oil, right? Blood in our system, right? I'm no medical professional, but I know that guys that have come back from war with multiple amputees, how did they possibly survive that? They survived that because they were able to keep the blood in the system. And tourniquets are your friend, right? Because if you hit a femoral artery or you hit something that's going to bleed out very quickly, your oil is leaving the engine very fast, right? And your success rate of survivability is about keeping the oil in the engine. These are easy to learn how. You can learn on a YouTube video how to pre-apply them or apply them to somebody else, right? I've had this situation happen to me where had I not had this, I would have been in bad trouble. Multiple stitches in my forearm, and luckily I had one of these in my bag, and I was able to have somebody tourniquet my arm to keep the bleeding, because I was bleeding out on the forearm. And so just having one of these, again, in your car can help somebody help you if that's the case. Most people die in car accidents and otherwise because the gap between the sheepdogs coming and the sheep's not being able to help themselves in the process. This will help you and help somebody else help you. That makes sense? So that tool, I've got some other stuff up here that I keep as options. Big flashlight in the house, close to your bed, making sure that if you're in one of these summer storms or we've got these hurricanes, everything goes out. I want to be able to see what you're doing, how to get around. I'll be glad to talk to you about any of this stuff anytime. You've got my contact information, share that. This isn't a pitch for business, but it is my passion. I'd be glad to share it with you. What do you have?
What can we bring on an airplane where they won't confiscate? I know they confiscated my mace once.
Yeah, you can't bring not many tools that I call tools, right? Practical things that you can use. Not many tools that you can bring on the airplane with you, right? I happen to have, if you ever saw my business card, it's actually.
What about the pen?
I'm sorry?
Carry-on or?
Yeah, carry-on. There's pens that are.
There are, yeah, that's a good comment. I need to cut you off, but I know exactly what you're saying there. What's called a tactical pen. It's just a hardened steel writing utensil, right? And I say this, it's gonna look a little dramatic, but I carry this all the time, right? It is one of the tools that I list on here. It's called a sock pea dagger, right? And that seems a little extreme. You go like, oh, I'm gonna carry a knife like that? You can carry these legally in Florida. And I've given one to Jenny's daughter, Ava, who's 17, my 21-year-old. My girls carry them, I carry them. I suggest this as one of your tools. Now, is it for bad people? Possibly not. Odds are no. Is for, I got attacked by a dog. When I told you that I had to use my tourniquet, I got attacked by a dog, by a Dutch Shepherd that was fully trained canine. I happen to own that dog. And unfortunately, he turned on me. I could have never expected it. I could have never predicted it, right? And I'm a pretty formidable opponent, and it was a full-on war to get that dog off my arm, right? But that's the things you can't predict. If you're jogging and you've got to deal with that situation, the only way you're going to get a bad person or a bad animal or anything else to get out of that zone is to flip the switch. You can't be proactively a offender and reactively. You're either in fight or flight, right? Fight or flight. So if somebody's in fight and they're coming up behind me, hey lady, if you mind stand up for me, you can be my example. So most people aren't going to come at you like here, so turn around, right? Can I touch you? Right? So if somebody was to grab her, right, what she got on her right now, or as far as options, right? She's got her hands and her feet, she's got no tools, right, with her. The problem is with your digits, right, with your fingers, you can't create enough pain to get me to shift into flight mode because I don't want damage, right? I don't want damage to me. That's evidence and it's not my potential. What I want is for her to create that. So what I would tell my daughter, let's say this pin, perfectly capable, right? If she walked around, walked into college or whatever, and when she walks between A and B, she carries this pin. Now she's got a tool that if I grabbed her like this, right, it doesn't take a genius to know my head's right here somewhere, and my crotch is right here somewhere, right? And so all she has to do in that panic is she's not trying to fight me and win. She's trying to get me off her so she can get space. So all she's going to do is this, right, or this. And the first time that strikes her opponent, he's going to, what's he going to do? He's going to cower away because he doesn't want to lose either, or she, right? And as soon as they break contact, you're out, you're gone. So something as simple as this can be your best tool, right? And this is a good example. It's a good hard pin that you could use, and the airlines will let you. It's a great question.
I also have a round brush that the center comes out of.
Okay.
That passes every airline. I've taken it internationally, I take it to California, where you're not allowed weapons, but that thing comes out, it is a sharpened point like that, and it's a weapon. And I bought it at a gun show. It's a round brush.
I've got a couple tools that, and frankly, Jenny and I went to Tulum and came back, and on the way back through U.S. Customs, now we had gone through U.S. Customs to get there and gone into Mexico, done our vacation, come back, and going through U.S. Customs, they're like, Miss, do you have a knife in your bag? I'm like, ah. She's like, no, you do. You had one of these in her bag, right? And the lady was nice enough to pull it out. She said, "What is that?" I'm like, "Oh, no." But they mailed it back to us, right? They took it and mailed it back. So you can't take it. Obviously, I couldn't suggest that, but there are particular tools like we talked about because airlines are getting a little crazy these days. I can talk for hours. I apologize. I'm going to give you one little tidbit that when I get back from Rome, which we're going to Rome for the Ryder Cup for business, Jenny's going with me. I'm going to tell you ladies something that she doesn't even know, is that I'm going to have to convince her not to wear her new engagement ring when we get there. Right?
Congratulations.
Thank you very much. I'm super excited. That while we're in Rome, she's going to get a new toy that I'm going to say, now you can't wear it. Right?
Keep the secret.
For that reason. But you got to keep the secret until we'll celebrate together.
Jeff, as always, thank you so